Somewhere over the quiet skies between Maryland and Virginia, a machine took off without a single passenger on board. And yet what it carried inside its cargo hold may end up saving thousands of human lives every single year. This is not science fiction. This is not a prototype sitting in a lab waiting for permission. This actually happened just days ago, and almost nobody outside the aviation world noticed. By the time you finish watching this video, you will understand why this quiet flight might be one of the most important moments in the history of American transportation, and why the company behind it has been fighting for years to reach this exact point. Before we go further, if you enjoy stories about the future arriving quietly while the world is busy looking somewhere else, hit that subscribe button right now. This channel exists to catch the moments that everyone else scrolls past, the ones buried under war headlines and political noise. We dig through it all so you don't have to, and we bring you the stories that actually shape the world you'll be living in 5 years from now. So subscribe, turn on notifications, and let's get into what really happened in the skies above the East Coast. For more than a decade, engineers and dreamers have promised the world flying cars, sleek electric aircraft that would lift off from rooftops and glide silently over traffic jams below. Every year brought a new demo, a new investor pitch, a new video of a shiny aircraft hovering for 30 seconds in a controlled hangar. And every year the promise stayed just out of reach, buried under mountains of regulation, safety testing, and skepticism from an industry that has learned the hard way that flashy demonstrations are cheap while airworthy aircraft are brutally expensive. That pattern has quietly broken this month, and almost nobody is talking about it yet. The company at the center of this story is called Beta Technologies, an aerospace firm based in Vermont that has spent years building electric aircraft most people have never heard of. Beta is backed by Amazon, one of the most powerful companies on Earth, and it has spent the last several years quietly outcompeting better-funded rivals in the race toward one specific goal. That goal is federal certification, the government stamp of approval that would finally allow electric aircraft to operate as a normal part of American airspace. Just days ago, Beta became the first company in history to actually fly real operational missions under a brand new federal program designed to make that dream real. That program is called the eVTOL Integration Pilot Program, a mouthful of a name for something surprisingly simple in purpose. The federal government wanted real-world data, not more demo videos, so it created a structure spanning 8 separate projects across 26 states where electric aircraft companies could finally test their machines doing actual work. It was launched through an executive order from President Trump roughly a year ago, an attempt to speed up a certification process that had dragged on for years while competitors overseas raced ahead. Out of every company invited to participate, Beta was chosen for 7 of the 8 projects, more than any other manufacturer in the country. Here is where the story gets genuinely suspenseful, because everyone assumed the first flights under this program would carry passengers. That assumption was wrong, and the reality turned out to be far stranger and far more urgent than anyone expected. Instead of nervous test pilots or curious tech reporters strapped into a cabin, the very first cargo loaded onto Beta's aircraft was something almost unbelievable. It was manufactured human organs, built in a lab, destined for a hospital, racing against the clock in a way no passenger flight ever could. The flights took off from an airport in Virginia and landed in Maryland, covering roughly 275 nautical miles of open sky. On board was cargo from a company called United Therapeutics, a biotech firm working on something that sounds like it belongs in a distant future rather than the summer of 2026. United Therapeutics has been racing to manufacture an unlimited supply of transplantable organs, hearts, kidneys, lungs, and livers, built rather than harvested, engineered rather than donated. If that mission succeeds even partially, the bottleneck stopping thousands of transplant patients from getting the organs they desperately need could finally begin to disappear. Think about what that actually means for a moment, because the implications are staggering. Every single day, patients die waiting on transplant lists, not because a cure doesn't exist, but because there simply aren't enough donor organs to go around. If manufactured organs become viable at scale, the limiting factor shifts from availability to logistics, from having the organ at all to getting it to the right hospital fast enough. That is precisely the problem this quiet flight over Virginia was designed to solve, moving fragile, time-critical medical cargo faster and more reliably than traditional ground transport ever could. The company's chief executive, Kyle Clark, described the mission as proof that electric flight can support routine medical transport at a dramatically lower cost across the entire country. That statement might sound like typical corporate optimism, the kind of line every startup founder says after a successful test. But in this specific case, the claim carries real weight because the alternative to electric aircraft for this kind of mission is expensive helicopters, congested highways, and unpredictable delays that can mean the difference between a successful transplant and a tragedy. If Beta can prove this model works reliably at scale, it changes the entire economics of emergency medical transport in America. There is also a political layer to this story that makes it even more interesting to watch unfold. The head of the biotech company behind these manufactured organs has said her ultimate goal requires thousands of organ delivery flights happening every single day across the country. That is not a small ambition, and it is not something that can happen with helicopters alone, given their cost and limited availability. It requires a fleet of affordable, efficient electric aircraft capable of making these runs constantly, which is exactly the future Beta is trying to build one test flight at a time. But before you get too excited about flying cars showing up in your neighborhood next year, there is a harder truth buried inside this story that deserves your full attention. The electric air taxi industry as a whole has been through an absolutely brutal stretch over the past 2 years. Several once hyped competitors have either collapsed entirely or stalled out completely against the wall of certification requirements that this entire industry has to climb before a single paying passenger ever boards one of these aircraft. Flashy demo videos turned out to be dramatically easier to produce than airworthy aircraft that regulators are willing to trust with human lives. Even Beta itself, despite being the clear frontrunner in this specific government program, has not escaped that turbulence. The company went public through an initial public offering back in November, and since that debut, its stock has lost roughly half its value. Investors have grown increasingly skeptical of an entire sector that keeps promising imminent breakthroughs, while certification timelines keep sliding further into the future. That skepticism is not irrational, and it is worth remembering as this story continues to unfold in the months ahead. So why did Beta choose to fly organs first, instead of racing straight toward passenger flights like everyone expected? The answer reveals something surprisingly strategic about how this entire industry actually plans to earn public trust. Moving high-value, time-sensitive medical cargo lets a company prove both the aircraft and the surrounding airspace rules work safely, without the enormous liability and public scrutiny that comes with strapping a paying customer into the seat. In other words, before anyone volunteers to fly in one of these machines, the machines have to prove themselves first, quietly, one low-profile mission at a time. This is not the only sign that momentum is building faster than most people realize. The current Transportation Secretary recently became the very first person to hold that office to personally fly aboard one of these next-generation vertical takeoff aircraft, one built by Beta itself. That is not a small symbolic gesture inside Washington, where cabinet officials rarely put their own bodies inside experimental technology for a photo opportunity. It signals a level of political confidence in this specific program that most emerging industries never receive this early in their development. And Beta is far from operating alone in this race toward the sky. Other major names are chasing the same certification finish line under the very same federal program, including well-known competitors like Joby, Archer, and Whisk. Each of these companies is racing against the same brutal certification clock, and each faces the exact same challenge of proving their aircraft are ready for the enormous responsibility of carrying human passengers safely. The company that crosses that finish line first, with money still left in the bank to actually scale their operations, will likely dominate this entire emerging industry for years to come. According to Beta's own public statements, the company expects its vertical takeoff aircraft to achieve full government certification sometime in 2028. Its other aircraft, the conventional takeoff version used in this exact medical mission, is on track to reach certification even sooner, potentially as early as next year. That timeline matters enormously because it suggests cargo and medical missions like the one we just described could become a genuinely normal part of American aviation before passenger flights ever become available to the public. In other words, you may see electric aircraft delivering organs and emergency supplies across your own state long before you ever get the chance to book a seat on one yourself. Step back for a moment and consider the bigger picture this single flight represents. For years, the entire electric air taxi industry has been defined by promises, glossy renderings, and demo flights performed for cameras inside carefully controlled hangars. What happened over Virginia and Maryland this month was something fundamentally different, a real operational mission carrying cargo that genuinely mattered, executed successfully under real-world conditions and real regulatory oversight. It is a small, quiet step, but it is also concrete proof that this technology has finally moved beyond pure spectacle into something resembling actual utility. Whether or not you will ever personally board one of these aircraft, this story matters far more than most people currently realize. It touches transplant medicine, federal regulation, emerging technology, and the deeply human stakes of patients waiting desperately for organs that may soon be manufactured rather than donated. It also reveals how quietly the future often arrives, not through a dramatic headline splashed across every news channel, but through a short, unremarkable flight that most of the country never even heard about until right now. The skies above America are changing, one careful, deliberate test flight at a time, and the next chapter of this story is likely to unfold faster than anyone currently expects. If this story genuinely surprised you, that is exactly why this channel exists in the first place. We chase down the quiet stories hiding underneath the loud headlines, the ones that will actually matter years from now, even though almost nobody is paying attention to them today. Make sure you are subscribed so you do not miss what comes next in this rapidly evolving industry, because the race toward passenger certification is only just beginning. Drop a comment down below and let us know whether you would ever be willing to board one of these electric aircraft once passenger flights finally become available, and we will see you in the very next video.